All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are so excited for you to join us for this year's Autism Awareness webinar. We're going to discuss, discover, explore trends for diagnosis and support of autistic learners. So let's go ahead and get started. The agenda today is as follows. We will do introductions of our panelists. Then we'll dive into Learnfully's overview and briefly talk about autism, the current state of autism here locally in the United States. I know we have a panelist joining us from across the pond, so those stats might be a little different, but I'll let her explain that. And then we will have a panelist discussion. We have incredibly talented panelists here. I am so excited for you to meet and hear from them. And then if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about Learnfully services and have a Q&A at the end. I strongly believe we will not have time, to be completely honest. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We have quite a robust discussion ahead. I am Jess Corinne. I am the head of education here at Learnfully. I started my career as a classroom teacher, K-1 split, eager and excited to implement everything that I learned in college. Quickly, I realized that I didn't feel equipped. I didn't have all the tools I needed to differentiate implementation. And so in order to feel equipped, I moved back to the Bay Area where I was born and raised and joined forces with Linda Mood Bell Learning Processes. And I feel wholeheartedly that they helped me refine the art of multisensory evidence-based instruction. I was with them for over a decade. I served as a clinician, a consultant, a director, a regional director. And then at one point, my life took a turn. I became a mother of now 4 children and started my own private practice, at which point I spread my wings and got training and in different programs such as Orton Gillingham, Wilson Reading System, Social Thinking, Step Up to Writing, and many more. And so that's what brought me to Learnfully. I am so excited and honored to be the head of ed here at Learnfully. So I'm going to turn the mic over for introductions, starting with Dr. Yajnik.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Misha Yajnik. I'm a general pediatrician located in Columbus, Ohio. I practice general outpatient pediatrics for over 10 years now. I have a very special interest in just the whole patient as far as physical health, mental health, and emotional health. I really focus on that in my care with families, kind of spreading that whole patient care and just kind of spreading more awareness about what pediatricians do. It's not just about the vaccines and the well checks. It really does go beyond the patient and the child. It's more about kind of holding and supporting the entire family. And so I really kind of try to do that in my practice and hope to continue spreading that awareness.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Okay, and next, Dr. Lopez.
Hey there. Hi, my name is Brian Lopez. I am a psychologist by training with a behavior analytic background. And I am the CEO of Jumpstart Autism Center. We have treatment centers in Colorado and in New Mexico. And that's kind of where I grew up, did my PhD work in San Diego, specialized in autism. And you know, I think much like what Jess says, kind of got out, was very excited to specialize in the field and quickly learned that having a PhD and a clinical psychology license really is kind of a minimum standard for kind of what it is that I wanted to do. So continued to learn and continue to get more experience in the behavior interventions, and eventually worked at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, Department of Pediatrics for several years. And there really wasn't any treatment available in Albuquerque. So brought my skills that I learned in California to Albuquerque and opened up a private practice, Jumpstart Autism Center, and have slowly grown that. Really I think that what this talk is about, and really integrating the complexity of autism and addressing the whole child, really is essential. And that's one piece that Jumpstart does bring. As a psychologist, we do annual, if not every 6-month behavioral health checks, where every client we serve, we do a full behavioral health workup and then collaborate with any specialty providers in medicine, but primarily working with primary care physicians to really meet the needs of our complex learners. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful that you're serving the New Mexico and Colorado communities. I served on the Navajo reservation in Gallup for some time with
Yep.
Linda Midbell, so it has a special place
Yep.
in my heart. So
Absolutely.
thanks for being here. Okay, so next up is the great Nikki Collins.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as well. So I'm Nikki Collins and I'm the autism coach. And everything that I do has come from the fact that I didn't know I was autistic until I was 34. So those autistic children turn into autistic adults. And I have an amazing team who I can refer my younger clients to, and I work with people who are 8 and over, and we work to reduce the diagnosis time frame so that it's more accessible for people. And really what I kind of do is I wanted to be the change that I desperately needed when I was a child, and I support through my lived experiences and a very handy special interest which spans over into my second decade now of personal development. So when you absorb materials in the way that I have over the last few years, it does give you some tools to share, and that's basically what I do. I help autistic people to step into an authentic version of themselves, and I absolutely love it.
It's clear. I'm going to do a plug eventually for your newsletter and blog. It's very clear in your voice comes out. So thanks for being here and so grateful. And then last but of course not least, our dear Rachel Leonard.
Hi, my name is Rachel Leonard. I'm an education specialist. I've been working in the field of special education for over 20 years, working with a wide range of, needs out there. I definitely have a focus on multisensory instructional methods to help just support our neurodiverse learners, and just love what I do being a special educator. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you're all here. Just in brief, I'll give an overview about Learnfully. I promise we'll have a chance to dive into the main event. Learnfully is a personalized platform that's on a mission to empower neurodiversity by allowing access for learners who process information differently to then reach our highly qualified and curated network of educational specialists. So typically a learner will start, or they'll onboard onto our platform through the Spark Learning Assessment, where we can pinpoint where the breakdown is happening in cognition, executive functioning, and the application to aptitude areas such as literacy and math. And then based on those results, we come up with recommendations, a learning plan, and we match them to a specialist according to their interests, their strengths, and their areas of need. And so at that point, thereafter, we pride ourselves on proactive, transparent communication with both the family, the caregivers, and the ecosystem connected to that learner. The learner continues as the center of our model, and we want to ensure that everyone has that open line of communication for consistency's sake, as we are all here wholeheartedly, holistically to treat and serve the learners in order for them to realize and then thus reach their strong full potential beyond learning in the classroom. Learnfully is multisensory. We mentioned these words, these buzzwords quite a few times, but all that means is we incorporate each of the senses to ensure that we're reaching the learner. We know that this ebbs and flows, that learning styles are somewhat debunked at this point, and so we want to ensure that our learners have access to information, to implementation, to instruction, and specialists who can tailor, differentiate their approaches to reach those learners through one of these 3 modalities. Auditory information being processed orally, so they tend to do best with things like discussions, podcasts, music, and the like. Visual learners, I know that it can change and evolve, but those who at this point do best with visual inputs, anchor information through charts, graphs, images, videos, and so forth. And then kinesthetic, which I have now evolved to, as you can tell I'm talking with my hands, is one who's very hands-on, project-based, and really I would argue that all of these learners do best with sensory breaks, kinesthetic especially. They need a lot of movement incorporated to maintain their engagement. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to shape and shift and evolve based on input. So we know neuroplasticity is alive and well, and we want to ensure that our learners are having the ability to be cognizant of how their brain works, how they learn best, but also through repetition and consistency throughout the layers of support we have here on our panel. We want to make sure that we're streamlining those pathways in their brain to connect to the areas that are able to support them best. So for example, if one learner has been memorizing information almost entirely, that information is held in your prefrontal cortex. And we want to ensure that we're training and administering instruction in a way that it then starts to transfer to the back of their brain, the broken Wernicke areas that are responsible for language processing skills. So through implementation, through coaching, through counseling, therapy, and all different measures, we are able to change some of the patterns in the brain to ensure that our learners are maximizing their potential and really making the most of what they receive. All right, so I have to admit, I completely recognize that statistics are dynamic and ever changing. And so I know that this is also based on the United States, and Nikki might have some different statistics to share, but generally speaking, we're seeing quite a big shift in the diagnosis of autism. We are at 1 in 44 learners. Depending on who you ask, we're able to diagnose autism as early as 2, 3, depending on who you ask. I am so glad Nikki's here because I completely believe that the last stat represents a skew, a disparity in detection. So the presentation greatly varies, right? If you know one autistic learner, you know one autistic learner. This states that boys are 4 times as likely to be diagnosed. Now, that does not mean that they warrant the most diagnoses. That means that those sometimes female learners are not as overt and they are diagnosed later in life. So again, statistics are based on the research and the studies conducted. These might not be 100% accurate even a week from now, but I really thought it would help us set the climate for the discussion ahead. I also like to keep in mind some quotes. You may recognize some of these names, you may not. These are cutting edge experts and advocates in the autism field who really are here to lay groundwork, pound the pavement, be advocates for agency, and make sure that we're seeing autism as not a disability, but one who just learns differently or processes the world around them differently. So I think it's really important to highlight differentiated learning here, an emphasis on strengths and interests, just like our implementation really values. And it can't define you. It can be an identity, but that is your choice as an autistic learner to define yourself in that regard. So I think without further ado, we should dive into this discussion because there's so much to talk about. Okay, so we're going to give panelists each a chance to comment on these questions. And again, if you have any questions that come up, because I know these are dynamic speakers, feel free to drop those in the chat. So let's get started. We're going to start with Misha. Can you explain the mission of your practice? It's really important to me and Learnfully to start with why. And so I would love, even though you did give us a little insight early on, can you expand on the mission of your work?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, I'm a general pediatrician, as I mentioned. I take care of kids from early as birth to usually 18 years old. Most of the time I try to hang on to them longer. For me, it's not just about the children. For me, it's like I mentioned, it's treating the whole patient, which includes the family. And I think that's so important for primary care providers, especially pediatricians, to realize how crucial that is. And when I say family, that could mean very different things. The family structure is ever evolving. And so I want to make it a point to understand kind of who's around these children, what kind of support do they have, what kind of lifestyle do they have? And I think it's so important for us to ask these questions. We're not just here as pediatricians to check mark your height and weight and, your development. I think it's so much more than that as far as your lifestyle, your, school, your emotional health, your mental health, your behavioral health. So I really make it a very important part of who I am as a pediatrician, how I treat my patients, and just what message I want to try to spread to more and more people.
Awesome, love it. And so at Jumpstart, our primary mission is to change a child's developmental trajectory. And that's any learner that we serve, regardless of diagnosis, is really meeting their needs and then trying to provide wraparound services as much as possible to meet those needs. We really see the service that we deliver as, one is that as adults, we have control of the environment, and then we utilize that environment to provide more and more reinforcement. We really have to be on track and in place to make these massive changes to support the learner in the areas that they have specific deficits to really maximize their potential. And one of the things that we do is we really take the perspective that the learner knows best. And so one of the things about Jumpstart that's a little bit different is that we bring a slightly, kind of a ABA 3.0 approach, where we're utilizing the science, not only the science of learning, which is ABA, but we're utilizing the science of teaching, which really brings about some of the precision teaching, some of the instructional design to maximize every moment we have with our learners to change that developmental trajectory. Finally, it really is ensuring that our staff are highly, highly trained so that every moment they have, they can actively engage their children, or I'm sorry, their learners in fun ways to acquire new skill sets, many times in ways that they don't even know that they're learning. They're just having fun. So ultimately, to try to change a child's developmental trajectory, that is what we're trying to do and trying to bring that about.
And I work with a vast range of ages from 12 all the way up to the 60s. And anyone other than that will be seen by another member of my team or somebody in my network. But as I said earlier, the core mission is to empower autistic people to become an authentic version of themselves so they can start to take off the mask, so they can start to understand the why behind the things that they do. And again, like Misha, it's about incorporating the whole family unit, because it's not just the child that you're helping. If you get it right, and you're feeding back and you're working together, it's very much a team effort to be able to put systems into place that support everybody. And that's kind of what I'm about. And that's really the sort of the mission of my practice.
Awesome. My mission is kind of like my why. Why am I a special educator? Why am I doing what I do? Is just really about my passion for supporting learners the way they learn best. It really is about meeting the learner where they are, developing those relationships with the learners and their families. And, I know we keep saying this, but really finding out passions and interests and just helping them, reach their potential. Just take the skills that they're in, the strengths they already have, and just push them further. So that's it.
I love it. It seems like we're all in line. So why is it imperative for the autism community to have your individual support? I know this is going to somewhat mirror the last one, but I'd love to hear just individually, since you all four have different focal points, why is it important that we have a whole child approach?
So for me, as a pediatrician, oftentimes I am that first person that these families are going to, and I take that responsibility very seriously. And vice versa. Sometimes I'm the first person that's maybe pointing out certain things in the child's development that the parents didn't see. And so I also take that role very seriously when I'm, seeing these kids for their well visits at a very young age and asking those developmental questions. And making sure I'm looking for the right cues and things that, I'm observing in the office, so those well visits are very important, going beyond, again, just there to measure your height and weight, there's a lot more that's going on. And so I think it's just so important for pediatricians to really look for these cues, ask the right questions, not as much as you can, try not to rush through things. And again, back to what I said earlier, just supporting the family. I want to be that person that they can call me and say, well, I'm not sure what to do next. Can you help me? And so I think just being that go-to person and making sure they know that you are there is so important.
And a lot of times I'm the second person. So Dr. Yajnik sees them, makes the concern, makes a referral. And so then part of my role here at Jumpstart is as a clinical psychologist doing diagnostic work. And so a lot of times it's really supporting the family through that process of coming to understanding why are there developmental differences, behavioral differences, and do those differences meet the criteria for autism? From there, it's really supporting the family as well as the primary care physician around, hey, here are the things that we saw, because our visits can last up to 4 or 5 hours, where we do get a great opportunity to for an understanding of what that individual's entire needs are. And so then reporting back to the primary care physician, hey, here's what we saw from a medical standpoint to try to, things that we might want to get worked up. If, for instance, most recently I saw a little 3-year-old who looked like might be having seizures during my interaction. Referred that back to the primary care physician, got it worked up, and sure enough, we're having some seizure activity or subclinical abnormal brain activity. But the other piece that I do, which I think is really critical, that I think most providers miss, and this is essential to trying to change a child's developmental trajectory, is in our autistic learners' profiles. It really is complex to understand how they best learn. And our goal, and one of the things that we have to do, is remove as many barriers that could be preventing that window of learning from opening. So many times I'll consult on cases where, with learners where their learning isn't reaching that times 2 doubling of skill set every week. And that's what we target to try to change that developmental trajectory, is doubling skill set every week. And when we aren't seeing those skill sets being acquired, a lot of times I'll come in and do a consult, and maybe there is something that needs to be addressed from a medical standpoint. And again, working with the primary care physician around that, but also educating the family about, hey, here's the complex needs of your child, and here are different ways that we can support that learner to really maximize their skill sets.
And I work with individuals to kind of move away from the negativity bias that surrounds autism. You've just got to do a Google search, and it's very unusual to find anything positive or supportive for parents, which they can then use with their children. And very often, because I'm autistic, the teenagers that I work with, I can be one of the first people that truly understand them. And they just have so many, oh, I'm not the only one moments. And I'm like, no, there's so many other people that are experience life through the lens of autism, just as you are. And that understanding and that validation can just, it can just change the trajectory of somebody who is really, really struggling, and to put tools and techniques into place to build that all-important self-esteem and confidence. For example, I had one of my teens, 13 years old, she delivered a whole school assembly on autism, and she absolutely smashed it. And what was the point of that? There was an actual point of telling you that, which has now left my brain. And yeah, so now she's being able to advocate for herself. She's able to step into something. She's now making communication cards that she can go and sell, just because she had that first spark of self-belief and just that encouragement and motivation to get out there, not just from me, but from the family and the support network that she also had around her.
From a special educator's perspective, I think the level of support is just really about providing support with instructional methods, those research-based methods that are, effective in supporting our learners. Bring those to colleagues, which could be the general educator, special educator, the aide, etc. Sharing success with families, support with implementing some of those strategies with families if that's appropriate. I think that's important. And just bringing a team approach, supporting with communication and promoting awareness and acceptance. And also just another thing that I just really feels kind of part of my responsibility as an educator is just advocating for the learner and family needs from the educational perspective, come with a little bit of insight that comes from workers with learners day in and day out in that educational environment, and just really supporting through that team approach.
Love it. It all goes hand in hand. It's like the beautiful narrative, right? From advocacy and empowerment and authenticity. So I'm just so excited that you all shared. Okay, how important is it to incorporate purposeful play? So we know we need to engage learners through interests and strengths, help empower and bolster those strengths to carry over into areas that they feel strong about improving. So how important is it for you to bring in the fun factor? I know a few of you have sprinkled this in, but I'd love to hear an explicit answer from each of you if you don't mind.
Well, Jess, you know, I love talking about play. So, gosh, so important at such a young age. I don't think we stress this enough. You know, I like to say, go back to the basics, you know, let our kids just have fun, be creative, get messy, you know, be bored sometimes, just, you know, problem solve. Like there's just so many benefits to just going back to the basics of letting them create and build and play, and you know, more child-centered. That's so important for me to be very clear with parents. I want it to be child-guided, not we're telling them what to do or how to build something or how to create something, you know, and spontaneous, you know, let them just find things around the house and do, you know, everything doesn't have to be led by fancy toys and gadgets. And, you know, how many times I have parents that come ask me, well, what toy do you recommend I go buy to help my child's development? And often I say it's the things that you don't buy that are going to help your child. You know, we don't want to fall for all of these different tools out there that are marketed to make us think that it's going to help my child's development. So I love to go back to the basics. I love to just encourage, just sit down on the floor with your child. That's all they need, you know, just that quality time. It doesn't have to be more, you know, we're all busy, we get it, but even if it's 10 to 15 minutes, let them guide it. Let them, you know, you'll be surprised what they come up with on their own. So.
You know, Jess, this is such a great question, and it's just not an easy one to answer other than it's critical. And it's really one of the, what I would hope would be some of the foundation for all intervention. I know it isn't necessarily, but I think to get the most out of every learner, we have to really make it engaging and purposeful play for that individual, and really meeting them where they are, and then expanding that play. Because a lot of times our learners don't have the skill set developed yet to engage in even some functional play at times. So taking their interests and then expanding that into functional play, that way they can truly engage with other peers and start playing with other peers and experiencing some of that social back and forth. You know, one of the equally important is to do some of the parent coaching, because many times parents are, I hear it all the time, I don't know how to engage my child. I try everything, you know. We're going to see a 1-year-old, 1 year, 10-month-old this weekend, and the family's talking, you know, I can't even feed my child. I can't engage them at all. And it really is trying to support those family members through coaching to understand, how do you use that child's interest, that learner's interest, to then expand and get them to explore the world a little bit more so that they can start learning from the environment.
So I'm going to follow on again from what Misha said. And sometimes some of the best toys and the best play is things that don't cost anything. A box, for example. How many hours of fun I used to have with my son and a box. And when I was when I was packing up to move house, he'd take my boxes, use them for all sorts of weird and wonderful things, make himself into a robot. It's like, okay. And how I incorporate play into even, again, working with adults is sometimes when you've got a bit of a demand avoidant profile and you don't want to do things, I will say, right, set yourself, fill the kettle up to the top, fill it up, let it boil. And then once, obviously not for small children, And then once it started to boil, go and do the thing that you don't want to do, because for an adult, maybe it's the washing up. So, oh, I don't want to do that. Right, kettle's filled. It's going to take longer to fill it up. And now I'm just going to get stuck into it. I'm going to hold the washing up, hang it out, whatever it is. And then you actually start to get past these executive functioning or dysfunctional blocks so you can get things done. But you're racing yourself and you make it into a game. And I know fully grown adults who sit at their desk doing their boring tasks and they're pretending they're in some alternative world and universe. So this amazing brain that they can use, they're using it in a very different way to maybe their neurotypical counterparts.
Sorry, that's totally me. And anybody who knows me knows that's my middle name. I gamify everything. Everything has to be a game and have fun factors. So thank you for saying that. Because adults need it too. Yeah, we all need to play. There's power behind play. Sorry, Rachel, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that is me to a T.
I love it. I love it. So purposeful play, I think that for me, just having that purposeful instruction and intervention, like play helps with that, right? We're able to engage our learners. We know that purposeful play helps like with social skills and communication skills, thinking and problem solving skills, which are so critical within that educational environment. But my favorite part is just taking play. It builds interest, it builds their motivation, right? And so then we can take their strengths and just build on those, build on their knowledge and their abilities and just take their learning to the next level. So.
And Rachel won't toot her own horn, but it also builds rapport. She has a very strong relationship and connection with her caseload and her families as a whole because she builds in play, she builds an interest and makes it fun and exciting for everybody involved. So shout out to Rachel. Okay, what is something you wish caregivers of recently diagnosed autistic learners know or would have known?
So one of my favorite things to talk about is mindset. I very often bring this up in my office at any age. Again, I see these kids at a much younger age. And so just kind of reshaping how the parents view what's going on, whether it's a small development concern I have, or whether it's me sending them to get some evaluations done. I'm kind of that first person often, that funnel, like I like to say. So it's more just preparing them mentally to sort of see where we might go with this, instead of the preconceived notion or that kind of stigma they might initially have when I mention delay, or if I might even mention the word autism, or just kind of certain labels that I might mention in the office. So I really like to start there with the family, again, just supporting the family. How are they going to view this? How are they going to approach this? Where are they going to go with this? Are they going to spiral down this, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? Versus, you know what, this is great. I'm glad I'm recognizing these differences in my child now. And what are we going to do about that? So I really try to put a positive spin on it, saying, it's not about labeling or, it's more about just what are we going to do next? How are we going to help you? How are we going to help your child? And that really changes the conversation. I think parents walk out of here feeling very different. And I've gotten that feedback many times. They don't walk out of here feeling all doom and gloom. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What do I do? How am I going to do this? Versus, okay, you know what? Here's our problem. This is what we're going to do. We kind of have a plan of attack. So for me, that's huge in any case, but definitely with my autistic families is just that mindset of how you talk about it.
Misha, I think you're right on. And I have the privilege of working with families at first diagnosis every week. And every family needs something slightly different. And it really is coming to, in the evaluation process as presenting the diagnosis, really understanding what those parents need to best help support them moving forward to meet their needs of their child, their learner. And it's hard to say what do I wish that they knew. I think the big things is time is of the essence, and there are going to be providers that don't feel like they're on your side. You don't got time for that. You got to move on, find another provider that is going to be right there, walking the walk with you, supporting Not that they have the answers, but they're willing to hear and they're willing to problem solve. And that I think the other big thing is that who your child is now is not going to be who they are in the future. And we've really got to seize the moments to support them in their learning, remove obstacles so that they can reach their true potential. While, autism's parenting a child with autism, and there's some research around this, is for moms, we've seen cortisol levels comparable to levels of active military. So the moms of children with autism are under huge amounts of stress. And I think that the other thing that I really try to encourage, although it's hard to hear at first diagnosis, is parents do need to take time for themselves, that they need to have healthy living and really care for each other, because the divorce rate's higher amongst children with autism and are amongst parents that have children with autism. And it's okay to prioritize your needs while still doing the best that you can to meet your child's needs. You can't forego your own needs.
If you forego your own needs, you're pouring from an empty cup and you can't help anyone, including yourself. So labels, yeah, I see labels actually as a positive thing rather than a negative, because we go through our lives being given labels such as lazy, stupid, not good enough. And then when you finally get the correct label of autism or some form of neurodivergency, it's actually this gateway to really understanding yourself. It's almost like being handed the keys to the kingdom so you can start to work out on a plan. So again, you can get those systems into place. And I think it's really important to know that learning takes place in so many different ways and so many different forms. My son's been home educated and his education has looked so far removed from the traditional sort of school setting. And he's just helped me put a course together, and he's 15 and earning a good income. So education, learning, we get there in our own time. In some areas, yeah, there's going to be some weaker areas to kind of work around, but that's what these systems are there to help with. They're there to support, and there's always going to be somebody who loves to do the things that your child doesn't like to do, and you can pay them to do it. Ta-da! That's why I've got a cleaner and a gardener.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that. I think that one thing I really wish caregivers knew, or, just will help realize as they move through this process, is that it really takes a team. It is a team approach. We want to support you and your learner, not just in school, but at home and in your community. We just really want to make sure that you feel comfortable having that open and honest communication as well. Like, your child, your child's needs, and we want to be a part of that. We want to hear that and respond. So.
Fantastic. This is going to go somewhat in line, but I feel like it's a little bit of a different perspective. What's one piece of advice you would give to maybe a recently diagnosed or an autistic learner who's had the diagnosis for some time? What would you tell that learner versus the caregiver? How would you coach them through that?
So, depending on the age, of course, my favorite thing to just say is, create your own path. I have this sign in my office. I'm looking at it right now, but I look at this every single day. It says, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. And I love it for myself. I love it for my patients. I tell my families that, I think it's just so important for them to not think they have to follow a certain path or fit into a certain box. And again, not just for my autistic learners. I think for most of us, just don't give up, create your own path, find out what your passion is, and look at your strengths. We often will talk about the negatives or the differences, but sometimes we don't talk about the strengths. And so often when I ask the parents, well, what's your child good at? And it changes the conversation, again, changes the mindset, and suddenly they're looking at the positives, not just, oh, well, my child can't do this, or, they're not talking yet, or they're not socializing, or they're not doing this, and oftentimes, well, let's talk about what they are doing. And I oftentimes see it in the faces of the parents when they walk out here. They're like, oh, wow, we didn't even think about those things, you know? So I think it is just, again, the mindset, create your own path. I talk about it all the time.
This one's a really hard question for me. Part of it is just because of the work that I get, or that I have the opportunity to do, and I don't get a lot of opportunity to have day-to-day interactions with some of our learners that are in transition readiness. So getting ready to go into school and really participate. But ultimately, I think with families and for all of the interactions that I get to do, or that I do have, it really is embracing that idea of making sure you're having fun, that it's life is one short. And so having fun really does keep you motivated and keep you engaged. But I think it's also being able to, when you aren't having fun, letting people know that. And because what happens is if an adult, and not, adults can be as rigid as anybody, and you have to do it my way. And we do have to learn when that does happen, that we do have to do it that way, or kind of modify. But it's also being able to advocate for, hey, this is how I learn, this is what's fun, and this is how I'm gonna do best. So, and it really is also trying to help families be that advocate for their child.
I could answer this like all night. I have so many different answers and I have to choose one. I like to ask people if time, age, money, social barriers were no object, if you had nothing was holding you back, what would you do? Then how can you then incorporate that into your learning and maybe into your future? What's your special interests? Is there something that you can focus on and build? Because my special interest has been personal development, and I'm a coach, and I'm a very successful coach. I've got my first book coming out in November. I'm 13,000 words away from writing it. So I never finished high school. I never finished it. I never got a single formal qualification. Learning is very individual. And as an autistic person, our brain, our operating system is very different to neurotypical non-autistic people. And it takes a while to digest the information. So if you say to an autistic person, what did I just say? You're likely to get a blank look and like, I don't know, but it did go in. It's just, it has to have time, like that big Christmas dinner, that Thanksgiving dinner. It needs to digest before you can go back and eat more turkey. And then that information will come out in a way that's actually usable. So give yourself some patience, invest in those special interests, and mindset absolutely, definitely is key, because if your mindset isn't supportive of you, you're not going to go as far as what you could. That's for sure.
I love what you said about mindset there. I don't know if this is really a piece of advice, but just something that I hope, like from an educator's perspective, is that I hope that my autistic learners would know that we're here to support them, help them learn the best way that they learn, and just that we promise to show respect, and just we really want to just do our best to support that learner with what they need, and just take their strengths and their interests and their passions and just respect that. So
everybody's on their own path, and it truly is individualized, differentiated, perspective taking, mindset, the fun factor, feeling engaged, having advocacy, all very important points. So thank you for that. What is one thing you wish others knew about autism? There's a lot of false information, like you said, Nikki, a lot of negativity, a lot of stigmatizing. What is one thing that you each wish that our greater community would know or understand about autism as a whole?
Gosh, so many things, but I think for me, again, just goes back to what I said about just the positives, focusing on what these kids are good at, what they can excel at, what, just kind of guiding them, helping them, and I think that's really what we need to focus more on, is that, early intervention that I, often promote with my younger kids that I see, but just pushing them in the right direction and helping them, and, as a community supporting them. I think more and more we're seeing certain centers that have certain, things available for autistic kids, or certain, learning opportunities. I think things that didn't exist maybe 5-10 years ago. And so I think just kind of realizing that there's got to be more and more of a whole community approach, and not just leaving that, as Brian mentioned, to the moms, the parents, the families that are going through this stress at home, that, can't take their kid out somewhere because they're worried about what the behavior or whatever the situation might be. And making them feel more welcome and not be so afraid to take their kids out, or even come here to my doctor's office, come to a doctor's office. They're often nervous about bringing them here. And just, I will get on the ground with your child and do what I can. I will meet you where you are. And I think that's what I want the community as a whole to just try to be more conscious of.
Yeah, and what I hear from that is the acceptance. Like, yes, we've been focused on awareness and cognizance for quite some time as a neurodivergent community, but we need to shift to acceptance and advocacy. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Misha and Jess, I think that I'm going to take kind of what you're touching on in terms of acceptance and just kind of what parents experience. And I wish the world as a whole understood more about what parents are experiencing and the challenges that they experience, and that how much negative social overtures they get in public for anything. And that's not just for children with autism, it's any child with challenging behavior, or that what someone defines as a challenging behavior, that they feel the ridicule and how poignant that is. And the idea of acceptance and just grace and tolerance, how far that goes. Many of my best friends have children with autism, and it's painful for them in terms of kind of the social, just kind of the experience they have from a social perspective, and around some of the, being out in public and the ridicule they'll get.
Yeah, and just following on from that, Brian, it's behavior, as you very well know, is a language in itself, and bad behavior, it is just demonstrating that something in that individual's environment is out of place. So you've got to go into detective mode by this point and start. Maybe you can't do anything in the moment because it's too heated, there's too much going on, and you've got the judgment of those of the people around you, especially if you're in a public place. And it's about then getting that person to a safe space and then backtracking. What happened? What was it? Okay, there was a helicopter. It was loud. It was the vibration rather than the sound. Okay, because this happened when the washing machine went off last week. Right, now we're starting to see things, and we can connect the dots and start to work on triggers. And then again, going back to those systems, put those systems into place to avoid them. And by the way, ear defenders do not work if it's a vibrational sound. It makes you feel like you become a part of the vibration, and that can be an almost instant meltdown. So just a little thing that I learned the hard way.
So one thing I think is just kind of my hope, just to tie in that awareness piece. I think what I almost looked at this is like, I just think it's just so important to take time to learn about autism, what it is, how, we as a community can be there to support. Just taking the time. I think we have just too many of those generalizations and out there still, and just really, it's up to an individual within any community to really take that time to learn, and just to also remember that each learner with autism is an individual.
Yes, and they're on their own path, and they may have other symptomatic behavioral signs and symptoms. And so I mirror, just echo everything you just said. It's so important. I compiled, I know we don't want this discussion to end. We might have to have round 2, team. But I compiled a few resources that we have on our website. We have a resource page that actually includes a blog from both Dr. Yajnik and Nikki. And Rachel has helped with some of this content as well. Hopefully Brian can help in the future. We have a family support group on Facebook. Feel free to spread the word. Join us if you feel comfortable doing so. We had a webinar last year that you can access. We have a Speak with the Pediatrician event coming up with Dr. Yajnik. And then, of course, there's some national resources. I don't want you to feel like you have to write all these down, so we're going to send it with the follow-up email. And we'll also hyperlink all of our panelists' websites so that you can access them, or if you have any other questions, you can follow up with them directly. We don't have a ton of time to go through this, so I'll just be brief. Learnfully services, as I said, start with an assessment typically, unless you had a recent neuropsych or some kind of educational psychological assessment done, and we can use those results. We still like to get to know the learner ourselves in order to personalize the instructional plan and the recommendations. Thereafter, we match them to a specialist, as I said, based on interest, strengths, and areas of need. Our assessment results the report itself is very comprehensive and relatively inexpensive. And so it breaks down those areas of strength, those challenges. We also discuss the impacts in and out of the classroom and how they present themselves. And then, of course, comes the recommendations, at which point we delineate the frequency, the duration, the multisensory program, the specialist, and the macro and micro objectives you can expect in our instructional models. Our services are quite broad. We provide educational therapy. We offer executive functioning coaching, some academic tutoring and study skill test prep support for generalization purposes. We can offer that online. We can offer that in person or a hybrid model. We have one-on-one pairs, groups, classes. We have parent-led instructional models, async combined with sync models. So there's so much we can do. Obviously, we pride ourselves in value differentiation at every level. And so we want to make sure that our learners have access to the programming and the format that we feel is in their best interest, that can really expedite both engagement and progress. We do not have time for Q&A, but you did drop a lot of questions in the chat. Thank you, thank you. So what we'll do is we'll send those to the specialists and make sure that they have a chance to add their voice to those questions. I know that some of our Learnfully and employees have been helping you along the chat lines, but I will make sure that they get to the appropriate parties. And I'm just so utterly grateful to all of you for attending, but specifically to our panelists for joining us and taking time out of their very busy schedules to educate, to highlight, to amplify the need for acceptance and awareness in the autism community. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we will absolutely follow up soon with some resources, the recording to this webinar, as well as answer your questions. Thanks, everybody. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.